The enduring power of the town meeting was its capacity for self-reform. While the institution was founded by and for white male landowners, its inherent structure, the requirement for open debate and local legislative accountability, made it a quiet yet crucial battleground for social change and civil rights in the 20th century. The inclusion of the electorate. The 19th and early 20th centuries saw the gradual, often painful expansion of the franchise in Massachusetts, largely formalized at the state level, but enacted and enforced at the local level by the town meeting and its officers. Property qualifications. These were slowly eliminated, opening the electorate beyond the colonial freemen. Immigrant voters. As waves of Irish, Italian, and Portuguese immigrants arrived, the towns had to incorporate them. The town clerk and selectmen were responsible for registering these new citizens, a process often met with nativist resistance, but ultimately enforced by state law. Women's suffrage. When the 19th Amendment was ratified in 1920, the selectmen and town clerks were the immediate executors of this massive social change. For the first time, women attended the town meeting not as observers, but as voting participants, doubling the available legislative power and forever changing the dynamics of local debate. Confronting prejudice in the local arena. In the post-World War II era, the town meeting became the stage for local battles over equality, specifically concerning housing and land use. Because the town meeting had supreme control over local ordinances and zoning bylaws, it was the place where prejudice was often codified and eventually challenged. The ultimate power of the town meeting was its ability to say no to outside forces, including the state and federal government. In the civil rights era, this power was tested by the need to address racial and housing segregation. The zoning wars. In many affluent, predominantly white suburbs outside Boston, local zoning was a powerful tool for exclusion. Town meetings voted on bylaws that mandated large lot sizes, for instance 2 acres per house, and restricted multifamily housing. While seemingly neutral, these laws effectively excluded lower-income and minority residents who could not afford to build or purchase on such large, expensive plots. Civil rights activists and liberal politicians sought state-level legislation to mandate affordable housing. The response from the town meeting machine was fiercely protective of local autonomy. Town meeting members argued passionately for the right of the town to self-determine its character and tax base, using the same language of liberty and self-governance that their ancestors used against King George. Conversely, opponents argued that the town meeting's absolute local control was being used to uphold a local tyranny, the tyranny of the comfortable majority over the excluded minority. The triumph of the argument. Despite initial resistance, the required nature of open public debate within the town meeting framework allowed for progressive change to eventually take root. Unlike a centralized legislature where deals are often made in private, the town meeting required that the arguments for and against fair housing, school integration, and inclusive local spending be aired in public. This public accountability, often broadcast on local access television in later decades, forced town officials and voters to directly confront the social and ethical consequences of their votes. Though sometimes slow and begrudging, change did happen, town by town, as citizens used their direct voice to adopt more equitable policies. The town meeting thus proved that the blueprint of local power was robust enough to handle the 20th century demands of pluralism and equality, provided the citizens were willing to wield their collective voice not just for self-protection, but for social justice. The town meeting machine, having survived imperial tyranny, civil war, and economic depression, now faces perhaps its most subtle but persistent threat, the tyranny of apathy and the complexity of modern life. In an era dominated by instantaneous digital communication, globalization, and massive state and federal funding programs, how can a centuries-old model of direct democracy remain relevant? The challenge of modern complexity. In the 18th century, a town meeting warrant might have 6 simple articles: elect officers, set the tax rate, repair the road to the church. Today, a warrant for an annual town meeting in a large Massachusetts town often exceeds 50 articles, many of them requiring hundreds of pages of background documentation. Zoning overlays. Debates are no longer about building a fence, but about complex planned unit developments, or PUDs, or density calculations involving state-level environmental regulations. Budget complexity. The town budget, once simple enough to be read aloud, now involves millions of dollars, federal grants, unfunded mandates, and labyrinthine state accounting rules. For the average citizen, understanding the warrant now requires a time commitment that clashes directly with the demands of the digital two-career family. Apathy became the new enemy of the machine. The machine adapts: technology and transparency. To combat complexity and apathy, the modern town meeting has embraced technology, proving that the blueprint can be drawn in digital ink. Warrant digitization. The physical warrant, once posted on the meeting house door, is now published weeks in advance online, often with detailed explanations, cost breakdowns, and committee reports attached as PDFs. Citizens can now study the business of the town on their phones. Cable and webcasting. The meetings themselves, which used to be restricted by the size of the hall, are now routinely broadcast live on local access cable television and streamed online. This allows citizens to attend the meeting without leaving their homes, drastically increasing transparency and oversight. Digital communication. The spirit of the Committee of Correspondence is now alive in email lists, official town social media accounts, and digital surveys used to gauge public opinion before a formal meeting. The revival of civic education. The biggest challenge remained attendance. In many representative town meetings where delegates are elected, the attendance of those delegates often dropped below 50%, threatening the quorum necessary to conduct official business. This prompted a revival in civic engagement efforts. Know Your Warrant sessions. Towns now host special informal public meetings days before the official town meeting, where the select board or finance committee walks the public through the most complex articles, simplifying the jargon and explaining the stakes. High school integration. Towns began making the study and observation of the town meeting a mandatory part of high school civics curriculum, ensuring that the next generation understood the mechanics of their ultimate local power. The enduring power of the local vote. Despite all the changes, the fundamental power structure remains the same. The legislature of the town is the people. A handful of citizens standing up in a town meeting can still derail a multi-million-dollar proposal, reverse a zoning decision, or launch a citizen's petition to change the town structure, all through the power of a single well-argued motion and a majority vote. The town meeting machine, though slower and more cumbersome than any digital solution, remains the most complete expression of self-governance in the United States. It's a living, breathing blueprint that reminds every resident of Massachusetts that their government does not exist above them, but is formed by them in a democratic ritual that has outlasted empires and technology revolutions. The weight of a single voice, first felt in Ipswich in 1765, is still the force that turns the gears of the machine. For over a century, the Massachusetts town meetings operated in a state of productive ambiguity. They governed the local reality, while the King and Parliament in London claimed ultimate theoretical authority. But in the 1760s, as the Crown sought to recoup the massive debts incurred during the French and Indian War, this comfortable ambiguity shattered. The British began passing a series of acts, the Stamp Act, the Townshend Acts, the Tea Act, designed to assert Parliament's full sovereignty over the colonies. London made a fatal miscalculation. They saw the American colonies as a single, disembodied entity.
They failed to understand that the true political life of Massachusetts resided not in the colonial capital of Boston, but in the dozens of fiercely autonomous micro-republics across the countryside. The network activates. When the news of the Stamp Act, 1765, reached the colonies, the town meetings reacted instantly and simultaneously. The Stamp Act, which required all legal documents and most printed materials to bear a tax stamp, was not just an economic burden, it was a direct assault on the legal and administrative functions managed by the towns themselves. The selectmen and the freemen, veterans of decades of intense, structured debate, knew exactly how to proceed. They didn't need to riot immediately, they needed to convene. Across Massachusetts, warrants were issued and townspeople gathered. What emerged was a synchronized, unified, and legal protest. The votes passed in these meetings were the first truly powerful statements of colonial resistance. Refusal to comply. Towns voted unanimously to instruct their court officers, lawyers, and printers not to use the stamped paper, effectively nullifying the Act's local enforcement. Instructions to representatives. They formally instructed their delegates in the General Court, the colonial legislature, to stand firm against the Act. Crucially, these instructions often carried the implicit threat of recall. A representative who failed to follow the will of his town would be summarily replaced. This established a direct, unbreakable chain of accountability from the smallest town gathering up to the highest provincial authority. This process was more effective than any spontaneous uprising. It was organized, legally documented, and carried the weight of hundreds of majority votes. It told the British that resistance was not merely the noise of a few angry radicals in Boston, but the mandate of the entire body politic. The Committee of Correspondence. The town meeting machine was now a communication network. The system, however, was still vulnerable to being shut down by the royal governor. To ensure the continuity of resistance, Samuel Adams, a master political strategist from Boston, championed a brilliant structural innovation in 1772, the Committee of Correspondence. The Boston Town Meeting established the first of these committees. Its purpose was simple: to state the rights of the colonists and to communicate and publish the same to the several towns. This innovation was quickly replicated. Over the next year, nearly every town in Massachusetts elected its own Committee of Correspondence. These weren't official government bodies, they were extra-legal, revolutionary committees sanctioned only by the vote of the local town meeting. The blueprint. If Boston needed to coordinate a response to a new British tax, its committee would dispatch riders carrying official town-voted resolutions. The relay. The riders would deliver the resolutions to the committees in Lexington, Concord, and Worcester. The action. Each receiving committee would then issue a warrant to convene its own local town meeting where the proposal would be debated, amended, and voted upon. This network created a shadow government, a self-organizing, rapid response political system that bypassed the authority of the royal governor entirely. The British could dismiss the General Court, but they could not dissolve hundreds of sovereign local town meetings. When the British Parliament passed the Coercive Acts in 1774, specifically attempting to suppress the town meetings by forbidding them from convening without the governor's permission, they only accelerated the revolution. The towns simply ignored the order. The town meetings, defiant and energized, became illegal assemblies operating openly against the crown. The town meeting machine, perfected over a century of managing local disputes, had become the organizational structure of a rebellion. It was the precise, disciplined mechanism that turned scattered individual resentment into a unified, armed political movement. For the next chapter, would you like to explore the model of America, how the town meeting structure influenced the U.S. Constitution, or focus on the town meeting's legacy, the challenges and endurance of direct democracy today? The men who gathered in Philadelphia in the summer of 1787 to draft the U.S. Constitution were not inventing a government from scratch. They were practical politicians, deeply versed in the political mechanisms that had governed their lives for decades. And for the delegates from New England, men like John Adams, who called the town meeting the best school of liberty the world ever saw, the model was already perfected in miniature. The town meeting machine, having successfully organized a rebellion and managed the affairs of state during the Revolutionary War, now offered a fundamental blueprint for structuring power in the new republic. The separation of powers, local style. The most profound lesson the founders took from the town meeting was the necessity of separation of powers and accountability. In every single town, they had a functioning system with clear checks and balances. The legislative branch, the town meeting, this was the direct sovereign power. It made the laws, set the budget, and defined the community's will. It was pure democracy. The executive branch, the selectmen, this elected board was responsible for executing the laws passed by the meeting. They could not create policy, only implement it. Crucially, they were instantly accountable to the next meeting. The judicial and administrative branch, the constables and juries, they enforced the peace and oversaw the fair application of community standards and taxes, again under the scrutiny of the voters. When James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and the others designed the federal government, they simply scaled up this familiar, working model. The Congress, the legislative, would debate and pass laws, just like the town meeting. The president, the executive, would administer those laws, just like the selectmen. The power of the article and the agenda. The town meeting's use of the warrant, which required every subject to be publicly advertised and voted upon, provided a practical template for ensuring legislative transparency. This concept found expression in the Constitution in several ways, most notably in the democratic expectation that representatives must clearly articulate their proposals and that the legislative process must be open to public scrutiny. Furthermore, the relationship between the town meeting, the people, and their local representative in the colonial legislature, the General Court, was the ultimate example of mandated representation. Town representatives were routinely given instructions by the voters and could be replaced if they strayed too far from the town's will. This relentless focus on the local mandate fueled the eventual demand for the Bill of Rights. The founders, having seen how easily central power could disregard local sentiment, as the king and parliament had done, insisted on formal amendments that guaranteed liberties. These guarantees were fundamentally about protecting the local, individual right to assemble, debate, and petition the government, the very rights exercised in every town meeting. The town meeting and federalism. The genius of American federalism, the division of power between a national government and state governments, can be traced back to the distinction between the town meeting's authority and the general court's authority. The town meeting retained power over all local matters: education, roads, fences, welfare. The general court handled province-wide issues, military defense, major treaties, larger judicial matters. This division was replicated in the U.S. Constitution's 10th Amendment. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. The people in this context often referred to the local political units, the towns. The town meeting served as the practical training ground for the entire political class that built the nation. It taught John Adams the power of the vote, gave Samuel Adams the organizational structure for rebellion, and instilled in generations of New Englanders the core belief that legitimate authority flows up from the people, not down from the ruling elite. For the final chapter, we can address the endurance and evolution of this democratic system, the legacy and the limit. Would you like to explore how the town meeting machine functions in the 21st century and the debates over direct versus representative democracy? Behind the thunder of the moderator's gavel and the contentious voices of the assembly, the smooth operation of the town meeting machine relies on meticulous record-keeping. The true longevity of the blueprint of local power rests on the shoulders of the town clerk and the select board secretary, the unsung heroes who transform raw debate into enduring legal history. The town clerk, the keeper of the covenant. The office of the town clerk is perhaps the oldest continuous elective office in New England. The clerk is far more than a simple administrator. They are the legal memory of the town, ensuring the continuity of governance across centuries. Their duties during the town meeting are absolutely critical. Recording the minutes. The clerk sits through the entire meeting, meticulously taking minutes. Unlike notes in a modern legislative body, the town meeting minutes must be precise, recording not just the subject of debate, but the exact language of every motion made, every amendment proposed, and the final tally of every vote. These minutes become the official, legally binding town record book. Certifying the warrant. The clerk ensures that the warrant was properly warned, publicly posted and distributed within the legally mandated time frame before the meeting. If the warning process is flawed, the legality of all subsequent votes can be challenged. Custodian of records. The clerk maintains all official town records, birth, marriage, and death certificates, zoning bylaws, election results, and the historical minutes dating back to the town's founding. During the Revolutionary period, the town clerk's duty was a quiet act of treason. By faithfully recording the seditious votes against the crown, the resolutions to form Minutemen companies or boycott British goods, the clerk provided a legal stamp of legitimacy to the rebellion. The minutes were not anonymous. They explicitly named the selectmen who signed the warrant and the moderator who presided, cementing their personal commitment to the revolution in permanent ink. The select board secretary, the engine of action. While the town meeting records the town meeting, the select board secretary, often the town manager or a dedicated assistant, manages the daily operations of the executive branch, the select board. This role is the engine that converts the town meeting's legislative will into administrative action. Their key responsibilities include drafting the warrant. The secretary is the professional who manages the complex process of compiling the warrant. They take petitions from citizens, review proposals from town departments, police, fire, public works, and draft the articles in the precise legal language required for a vote. A poorly worded article can lead to a massive legal headache or a failed project. Executing the votes. After the town meeting adjourns, the secretary reviews the newly passed budget and bylaws. They ensure that departments are notified of their new appropriations, that new bylaws are forwarded to the Attorney General for approval, and that the Select Board begins the process of implementing the capital projects approved by the vote. The silent check and balance. Together, the town clerk and the Select Board secretary form a silent but powerful check on the entire town meeting machine. The clerk acts as the historical and procedural conscience, ensuring legality and documenting transparency. The secretary acts as the administrative conscience, ensuring the feasibility and efficient execution of the democratic will. The combination of their detailed work is why the town meeting system is so robust. It is difficult for corruption to thrive when every financial and legislative decision is recorded in meticulous detail by an elected, independent town clerk and then professionally executed and monitored by the administrative secretary. The town meeting is fueled by passionate debates, but it is organized, made legal, and sustained by the precision of these two administrative offices. The influence of the town meeting machine did not stop at the borders of Massachusetts. The successful use of this decentralized, direct democracy to launch a revolution and establish a new constitutional government served as a model, an inspiration, and sometimes a source of confusion for political thinkers and nations across the globe. spreading the blueprint to New England. The most immediate transfer of the town meeting blueprint occurred in the neighboring New England colonies, later states. Settlers migrating from Massachusetts carried the covenant and the warrant with them. Vermont and New Hampshire. These states adopted the town meeting wholesale, and it remains a vigorous form of governance there today. Vermont's Town Meeting Day in March is practically a state holiday, a modern demonstration of the machine's continued operational status. Connecticut and Rhode Island. While their political development was slightly different, the emphasis on local legislative control and the direct democratic assembly was a dominant feature, ensuring that the entire region retained a powerful local check on central authority. This regional continuity ensured that the federal government, from the very start, had to contend with a large block of states where citizens were accustomed to being their own legislators, a powerful factor in pushing for the eventual Bill of Rights. The observation of Tocqueville. Perhaps the most famous external validation of the town meeting came from the French political theorist Alexis de Tocqueville. In the 1830s, he toured the United States, seeking to understand the nature of American democracy. He published his observations in Democracy in America, where he dedicated significant attention to the New England town. Tocqueville viewed the town meeting not just as a governmental structure, but as a school for citizenship. He wrote that local institutions are the chief means of instructing the people in the art of self-government. He marveled that ordinary citizens were forced to learn how to manage public funds, they personally voted on taxes and appropriations, debate law, they had to defend and oppose specific legislative articles, and hold officials accountable. He concluded that while the federal system provided liberty, the town system was what taught the Americans how to use their liberty. He saw the town meeting as the foundational social institution that created the unique American character of self-reliance and civic engagement. Modern global relevance. In the 20th and 21st centuries, the town meeting concept has been studied and sometimes adapted by emerging democracies and organizational reformers seeking to empower local communities. Participatory budgeting. The modern global movement of participatory budgeting, where citizens directly decide how a portion of a public budget is spent, is a direct, albeit formalized, application of the town meeting's core function, the collective local control of the purse. Corporate governance. The annual shareholder meeting of a company, where every owner of a share gets a vote on the company's direction, draws on the same contractual, covenantal tradition that governed the early Puritan towns. Decentralized movements. In movements advocating for greater local autonomy, environmental protection, or local food systems, the idea of a binding local assembly where the people directly determine policy continues to serve as an inspirational model for maximizing grassroots control. While the specific machinery of the town meeting, the moderator, the warrant, the selectmen, is deeply rooted in Massachusetts law, the blueprint's ideal that citizens must assemble and legislate for themselves for democracy to truly thrive is a universal concept. It is the legacy of the town meeting machine that the highest expression of political freedom is often found not in the halls of Congress, but in a crowded, noisy, and supremely democratic town hall.
The final frontier for the town meeting machine is the challenge of the 21st century: climate change. Can an institution designed to govern local affairs, potholes, schools, and zoning, effectively tackle a crisis that is fundamentally global in scope? The answer, demonstrated by Massachusetts towns, lies in the machine's ability to translate vast, abstract problems into concrete, local action. Translating global risk to local action. In recent decades, town meetings across the Commonwealth have become a leading edge for local environmental policy. This is because the effects of climate change are experienced acutely at the municipal level.
Rising sea levels threaten coastal infrastructure, extreme weather demands better storm drainage, and fluctuating energy costs impact the town budget. The town meeting machine, through its articles and votes, turns these global risks into actionable, locally funded mandates. Energy efficiency bylaws. Towns have used the town meeting to vote for local energy efficiency codes that exceed state minimums. They vote to fund energy audits for town buildings and approve bond issues to install solar panels on school roofs. Renewable energy goals. Many towns have passed articles committing them to a 100% renewable energy future by a specific date. While these goals are aspirational, the binding financial decisions made in the same meeting, such as authorizing the Select Board to negotiate power purchasing agreements, PPAs, for solar or wind, give them teeth. Banning plastics and styrofoam. On a smaller but highly visible scale, citizens introduce articles to ban single-use plastics or styrofoam from local businesses. These debates often pit environmentalists against local store owners, forcing a direct community dialogue and vote on the costs and benefits of sustainable consumption. The power of the divestment article. One of the most powerful examples of the town meeting's ability to influence global policy occurred through divestment articles. Citizens, unable to directly influence the actions of oil companies or national banks, used the legislative power of their town meeting to target their town's own investment portfolios. A citizen-led article would demand that the town's trust funds and pension investments divest from companies involved in fossil fuel extraction. The debate in the town meeting was fiercely intellectual. Proponents argued that continued investment was morally complicit and financially risky in the long term. Opponents argued that the town meeting was overstepping its local mandate and that prioritizing social goals over maximum financial return was a fiduciary failure. Despite the complexity, many towns voted to divest. These local decisions, multiplied across dozens of wealthy New England towns, created political pressure that eventually translated up to state pension funds and university endowments, demonstrating how the decentralized machine can exert unified, significant moral and financial force. Resilience and the future warrant. The future of the town meeting machine will increasingly be defined by resilience. Coastal towns must vote on articles to raise seawalls and redesign public docks. Inland towns must appropriate funds for stronger culverts and updated stormwater management systems. This work forces citizens to confront the costs of climate change, not as an abstract future threat, but as an immediate line item on their annual tax bill. This local financial accountability ensures that climate action, however challenging, is adopted not because of federal mandate, but because the assembled people have collectively decided to tax themselves for their own survival. The town meeting, born in the age of musket and parchment, proves its enduring relevance by providing the most direct, accountable mechanism for citizens to legislate their own response to the defining crisis of the modern age. The blueprint continues to function, adapting its focus while preserving its core democratic structure. As the town meeting machine grew in complexity, as detailed in Chapter 10 and 15, a new non-elected figure emerged to manage the administrative load, the town manager or town administrator. The introduction of this professional technocrat created a necessary ongoing tension with the Select Board and the voters, challenging the foundational purity of direct democracy. The problem of professionalism. The selectmen, the town's executive board, are citizens elected from the community, often a lawyer, a retired engineer, and a local business owner. They serve part-time and are unpaid or paid a nominal stipend. In the simple 18th century town, this was sufficient. However, a modern town budget involves millions of dollars, complex federal and state compliance issues, environmental permits, labor negotiations with police and fire unions, and intricate debt management. The part-time selectmen simply could not manage this vast administrative machinery. The solution was the town manager, a full-time, highly educated, professional executive hired by the select board. The town manager's role. The town manager acts as the administrative CEO of the town. They're responsible for daily administration, overseeing all town departments, public works, police, finance, etc. Budget preparation, working with the finance committee to prepare the massive, detailed budget that will be presented to the town meeting, and policy implementation, ensuring that the complex votes and bylaws passed by the town meeting are implemented legally and efficiently. This introduction of a professional executive creates a fundamental shift in the machine's power dynamic. Then, 1765, the selectmen created the policy and administered it. Now, 2025, the town meeting creates the law, the selectmen set the direction, and the town manager executes the law. The executive challenge. The tension arises because the town manager, a salaried expert, often holds more practical knowledge about the town's finances, infrastructure, and legal limits than the volunteer selectmen they employ. The select board's dilemma. The elected selectmen are the bosses, but they rely heavily on the town manager's expertise to avoid costly mistakes. They must ensure the town manager follows the democratic will of the people, even if the manager believes that will is inefficient or fiscally unsound. The town manager's dilemma. The job is to run the town efficiently, but they report to a constantly changing board of amateur politicians, the selectmen, and ultimately are governed by a massive, unpredictable legislative body, the town meeting. The manager must skillfully navigate the line between offering expert advice and respecting the supreme legislative authority of the town meeting. If the town meeting votes to approve an article that the manager believes is bad policy, the manager's duty is not to protest, but to find the most efficient way to implement the bad policy. Democracy versus efficiency. The rise of the town manager is the town meeting machine's concession to the modern necessity of professional efficiency. However, the machine contains the antidote to pure technocracy. The town meeting can always fire the boss. If the town manager repeatedly clashes with the public will or implements policy poorly, the elected select board has the power to terminate their contract. Moreover, the select board itself is subject to annual re-election, ensuring that if they fail to manage the manager, the voters will replace them. Thus, the town meeting machine maintains its ultimate sovereignty. The technocrat may run the daily operations, but the citizens still hold the power of the purse and the power of the vote, guaranteeing that the will of the assembled people, however complex the issue, remains the final law of the town.
In the 21st century, the town meeting machine faces a new set of cultural challenges. The fragmentation of media, the rise of instant political outrage, and the importation of national ideological battles into the quiet confines of local government. This pressure often falls hardest on the moderator, whose job is no longer just to enforce Robert's rules, but to manage volatile public passion. The amplification of local issues. In the 18th century, a divisive local issue, say a dispute over common land, was debated by neighbors who knew each other and whose arguments stayed within the meeting house walls. Today, a zoning article concerning the construction of affordable housing or a local mask mandate can instantly be amplified on social media, attracting attention and passionate speakers from outside the community. The moderator must maintain order while navigating two crucial dynamics: ideological overlap. National political tribes increasingly adopt local issues as their causes.
A debate over a new school curriculum, for example, often mirrors heated national arguments about education, making reasoned local compromise nearly impossible. The digital echo chamber. A speaker's highly emotional 5-minute statement is no longer just heard by the assembly. It is recorded, clipped, and instantly uploaded, where it is often stripped of its context and used to fuel online disputes long after the meeting has adjourned. The moderator's 3 rings of control. The successful modern moderator must master 3 distinct rings of control to keep the machine running. The clock, time limit, to ensure that dozens of articles on the warrant are addressed and to prevent a single passionate issue from dominating the night, the moderator strictly enforces time limits. They must allocate time not based on how angry a speaker is, but based on a fair distribution of time between proponents and opponents. The use of the clock is a constant, unpopular decision. The moderator must be prepared to tell a tearful parent or a furious senior citizen that their time is up, a moment that is frequently met with visible public frustration. The warrant, relevance. As ideological debates seep into the local arena, speakers often attempt to use an article, example funding for a town vehicle, to discuss unrelated national policy, example foreign trade. The moderator must ruthlessly enforce the relevance rule, cutting off any speaker whose remarks stray from the specific article being debated. This is a delicate political tightrope. The moderator is accused of censorship, but their job is to protect the integrity of the process. If every speaker is allowed to lecture the assembly on national politics, the town's actual business, the budget, the bylaws, will never be completed. The decorum, civility. Perhaps the hardest task is managing decorum. The town meeting is structured on the principle of deliberation, not confrontation. The moderator must enforce rules against personal attacks, interrupting other speakers, and addressing the public directly rather than the chair. When passion boils over, the moderator's gavel must be backed by authority. In extreme cases, they must warn a disruptive individual and, if necessary, instruct the town constable to remove them from the hall. This is the ultimate, rarely used power, the removal of a citizen from the legislative body they have every right to attend, but it is the final safeguard against the failure of the democratic machine. The modern moderator's dilemma, thus, is a fundamental test of the town meeting's strength. Can a system of direct democracy withstand the centrifugal forces of a polarized, digitally interconnected society? The answer, year after year, is yes, but only through the continuous, difficult application of rules, procedure, and the unwavering defense of civic order by its presiding officer. This chapter explores the contemporary challenges to the town meeting. Would you like to proceed with a final summary or epilogue, or a fictional short story focusing on a modern town meeting debate? The town meeting machine, as described by Tocqueville, is often celebrated for producing the citizen legislator, the informed resident who reads the warrant, studies the budget, and legislates wisely. In reality, the machine faces the myth of this ideal citizen and instead relies on the power of specialized, elected volunteers to perform the necessary detailed work. The rise of the standing committees. No single resident, nor even the select board, can master the sheer volume of information required to govern a modern town. To ensure informed decisions, the town meeting blueprint has incorporated a crucial layer of volunteer specialization, the standing committees. These committees are filled with residents elected or appointed based on their professional expertise or passion, and they function as the crucial analytical engine for the town meeting. The Finance Committee, FinCom. This is the most powerful committee after the Select Board. Composed of several elected residents, often retired accountants, financial professionals, or business owners, the FinCom spends months analyzing the town manager's proposed budget. They grill department heads, review revenue projections, and ultimately present the town meeting with their recommendation on every single budget article. The FinCom's recommendation is usually the single most influential factor in how the meeting votes. The Zoning Board of Appeals and Planning Board. These boards handle all land use issues. They spend countless hours reviewing complex proposals for subdivisions, commercial developments, and variances. Their rulings and recommendations are essential for the town meeting, which holds the final power to change the town's zoning bylaws. The power of recommendation. The citizen legislator model suggests that a resident should show up and vote based on personal study. However, the reality of a 50-article warrant means most citizens heavily rely on the recommendations from these expert committees. At the town meeting, when a complicated article, example funding a new sewer pump station with a 20-year bond, is presented, the first question is always, what is the FinCom recommendation? A unanimous recommendation for the article from a respected finance committee is often enough to swing the vote, even if the majority of the assembly hasn't personally studied the $10 million bond proposal. Conversely, a divided or negative recommendation almost guarantees a contentious debate. This system is an implicit admission that pure direct democracy is too slow and inefficient for complex technical issues. Instead, the town meeting blueprint leverages the specialized knowledge of its dedicated volunteers. The democratic safety valve. Does this reliance on expert committees undermine democracy? The town meeting blueprint says no for two critical reasons. Transparency. The committees, unlike closed-door legislative commissions, must meet in public, as required by the state's open meeting law. Their discussions, data, and disagreeing opinions are available to the public. The final say. Most importantly, the committee recommendation is not a vote, it is merely advice. Any citizen can still stand up, challenge the recommendation, propose an amendment, and attempt to persuade the assembly to vote against the experts. The supreme legislative power, the final vote, always rests with the full assembled body of citizens. The town meeting machine, therefore, functions by allowing its specialists to do the heavy lifting of research and preparation, but retaining the democratic safety valve of ultimate legislative review. The myth of the citizen legislator is tempered by the reality of the specialist volunteer, ensuring that governance is both informed and accountable to the people. While the annual town meeting deals with the budget and routine matters, the true test of the town meeting machine comes during the special town meeting, STM. Called to address a sudden, critical, or controversial issue, the STM frequently lacks the broad attendance of the annual meeting, placing immense power in the hands of a simple majority of those who bother to show up. The trigger, crisis and contingency. A special town meeting is called by the Select Board, or sometimes by a petition of a certain number of voters, to address issues that cannot wait until the next annual meeting. These issues are often fraught with tension. Emergency appropriations, funding to repair sudden massive damage from a hurricane or flood. Controversial land deals, a proposal to sell a highly valued piece of town-owned land to a private developer. Bylaw overhaul, a major contentious change to the town's foundational zoning structure. Because STMs are unscheduled and often occur during the week, they attract an audience heavily biased toward those with the strongest opinions, both organized proponents and dedicated opponents, creating a volatile environment. The moment of truth, the simple majority vote. The drama of the special town meeting centers on the difference between the simple majority, more than half the votes, and the two-thirds majority. Most articles require a simple majority to pass. This means a decision that affects the entire community, financially, socially, and aesthetically, can be determined by a small dedicated group of citizens who represent a fraction of the town's total registered voters. Consider the hypothetical article to sell the historic town-owned Smith Farm to a big-box retailer. The attendance trap. Out of 10,000 registered voters, perhaps only 500 attend the STM. The quorum is met. The debate. Proponents argue the sale will create jobs and generate huge tax revenue. Opponents argue the sale will destroy the town's historical character and generate traffic congestion. The vote. The moderator calls the vote. 251 people vote yes and 249 people vote no. The article passes by a margin of 2 votes, a decision that fundamentally alters the landscape and fiscal future of the town is made by 251 individuals, or 2.51% of the registered voters. The irony of direct democracy. This situation highlights the central irony and ultimate risk of the town meeting machine. Absolute democratic power is fragile and highly dependent on participation. The irony, the machine grants every citizen the ultimate direct power to legislate, yet it penalizes those who choose apathy. The decision is legitimate and binding because every voter had the opportunity to attend and vote. The system does not care why 9,500 people stayed home. The power of organization. The STM becomes a showcase for effective grassroots organization, the side that manages to mobilize its members, providing transport, dinner, and clear talking points, almost always wins. This rewards local activists, reinforcing Tocqueville's observation that democracy demands relentless political work. The outcome of the special town meeting, though often controversial, cannot be overturned by a higher executive or legislature. It can only be overturned by a subsequent town meeting vote. The 2-vote margin becomes the law of the land, a stark reminder that in Massachusetts, the greatest authority remains the unpredictable and immediate will of the assembled people. To fully appreciate the genius of the town meeting machine, one must view it not as a static structure, but as a dynamic system of feedback loops. This continuous cycle of action, reaction, and accountability ensures that the government is perpetually responsive to the people, preventing the bureaucratic inertia common in larger, less accessible systems. The Select Board's challenge. The system starts with the Select Board, the executive. After the town meeting passes the annual budget and new bylaws, the Select Board and the town manager must execute these decisions. Action. The Select Board instructs the Department of Public Works, TWP, to repave a section of road, as mandated by a town meeting appropriation. The loop begins. The DWP uses the money, often making decisions about materials, timing, and sequencing that impact residents. Loop 1. The immediate operational feedback. This first loop is immediate and highly personal. Citizen experience equals Select Board complaint. If the DWP's work is slow, poor quality, or causes excessive traffic disruption, the citizens don't write a letter to Congress. They call or email their elected selectmen directly. Citizen feedback. My tax money paid for that road and it's already cracking. Select Board reaction. The selectmen must immediately address the citizen, investigate the DWP's work, and force corrective action. This public pressure holds the executive, the Select Board, and the administration, the town manager, constantly accountable for the quality of services. This loop forces the executive to focus intently on operational excellence, knowing that every failure results in a direct, personalized confrontation with a voter. Loop 2. The political fiscal feedback. This second loop is slower and more consequential. Budget performance equals town meeting review. The Select Board and the town manager must present a detailed report on how they spent the previous year's appropriations at the next annual town meeting. Town meeting review. The Finance Committee highlights budget variances, money spent over or under budget. Citizens can then question the Select Board and department heads publicly. The vote. If the Select Board and the town manager are deemed to have mismanaged funds, the town meeting can punish them by cutting their proposed budget for the upcoming year or rejecting a warrant article proposed by the executive branch. This cycle directly connects operational performance, how well the roads were paved, to political consequence, losing the next budget vote or being replaced in the next election. This cycle directly connects operational performance, how well the roads were paved, to political consequence, losing the next budget vote or being replaced in the next election. It is the mechanism that keeps the machine disciplined and financially responsible. Loop 3. The legislative bylaw implementation. This third loop ensures the laws of the town are continually refined. Bylaw implementation equals citizen petition for change. If a bylaw passed by the town meeting, for example, a new local restriction on development, is found to have unintended negative consequences, for example, preventing a desirable business from opening, citizens have the power to force a review. Citizen petition. A group of 10 voters can petition to place a new article on the warrant to amend or repeal the problematic bylaw. The re-vote. The town meeting is then forced to re-legislate the issue, learning from the mistake of the previous year's vote. This final loop ensures that the town meeting machine is not rigid. It has a built-in mechanism for continuous self-correction, allowing the laws of the town to evolve organically based on real-world experience. The town meeting machine, therefore, thrives not because it is perfect, but because it is a constantly self-regulating system of democratic feedback, forcing those who govern to remain perpetually accountable to those who are governed.
The story of the town meeting machine is ultimately the story of a contract, a covenant forged in the New England woods and renewed annually in countless gymnasiums and town halls. It is the agreement that the most powerful force in government should not be a king, a Congress, or a committee, but the citizen with a voice and a vote. The enduring sound. The sounds of the machine have changed over time. The scraping of chairs on wooden floors has replaced the clatter of muskets on the town common. The drone of a microphone has supplanted the unamplified call of the moderator, but the essence remains. The reading of the warrant. The rhythmic, deliberate reading of the articles, ensuring that every citizen knows precisely what business is before them. A commitment to transparency that began with a piece of paper nailed to a church door. The debate. The contentious, often frustrating, but profoundly democratic exchange of arguments between neighbors, forcing compromise and respectful dissent. The gavel's rap, the final, authoritative sound that transforms talk into law, turning a show of hands into a binding legal mandate for the entire community. Liberty as a continuous duty. The most critical insight offered by the town meeting machine is that democracy is not a spectator sport, and liberty is not a birthright guaranteed by a distant constitution. It is a continuous, demanding duty. The machine does not function automatically. It requires reading. The citizen must read the warrant and the FinCom reports. Attendance. The citizen must show up, even when the meeting is long, cold, or boring. Voice. The citizen must stand up and speak their mind, accepting the risk of failure. Acceptance. The citizen must accept the result of the majority vote, even when it is personally painful, and then participate in the next year's cycle to try and change it. The town meeting is, in its final form, the ultimate check on the myth of the good leader who will solve everything. It asserts that the best government is the one where the people are constantly engaged, learning through failure and legislating for themselves. The machine is not efficient. It is not always orderly, but it is sovereign.
As long as the citizens of New England towns continue to attend, debate, and vote on the funding for their roads, their schools, and their future, the blueprint for local power forged in the crucible of revolution will remain the operating system of their democracy. The warrant for the next annual town meeting is already being drafted. The perpetual machine waits for the people. To better understand the blueprint of local power described in this narrative, here is a glossary of the essential terms that define the structure and operation of the town meeting machine. I, the legislative power. Town meeting, the legislative body of the town. In its open form, all registered voters can attend, debate, and vote on all matters. In its representative form, the town is divided into precincts that elect delegates, town meeting members, to attend and vote on behalf of their neighbors. The town meeting holds the supreme legislative power of the town. Warrant, the official document that calls the town meeting to order. It lists every single item of business known as an article that will be debated and voted upon. Nothing can be discussed or voted on that is not on the warrant. The warrant is the legal cornerstone of the machine. Article, a specific item of business on the warrant. Examples include an article to appropriate funds for a new school, to amend a zoning bylaw, or to elect a town official. Quorum, the minimum number of registered voters or elected members in a representative meeting that must be present for the town meeting to legally transact business. Simple majority, more than half of the votes cast. This is the required margin for most decisions, including budget appropriations. Two-thirds majority, a voting threshold requiring two-thirds of the votes cast, approximately 67%. This margin is typically required for major fundamental decisions, such as zoning bylaw changes or authorizing large municipal debt, bonding. Petition article, an article placed on the warrant by a legally required number of citizens, often 10, rather than the select board or a town committee. This is the primary tool for citizens to force a debate on their own agenda.